Have a question for you. Just want to know how many people I may be having an unintended reaction to my first illustration. How many of you are scared of flying? A couple? Okay, well, sorry. Trust me, there's, planes going down are a very rare thing. But I was reminded this week of a trip that I had to make. It was actually a bunch of us here in Alberta that were going as a group to a seminar, to a conference that happened to be happening in Indianapolis. And like I said, there was a fairly sizable group of us that were going to this conference. And we decided that the best way to do this would be to fly out of two cities. So Edmonton was one of the cities that we flew out of, and the other city, well, I won't mention its name in polite company, but it starts with a C and it ends with Garry. But we were both flying out of these two airports, and we were going to Indianapolis, but both flights flew into Chicago. So basically, our planes were going to land within about 10 minutes of each other in Chicago, and then we were going to join up as one group and make the flight from Chicago to Indianapolis. So we're all ready to go. We've got everything planned. Like I said, about 10 minutes in between the two flights coming from Alberta landing, and then it was about an hour break from the last plane getting down until our connecting flight left to go from Indianapolis to Chicago. From Chicago to Indianapolis, where we were going to be staying for a week. So we in Edmonton, I make clear I flew out of Edmonton, we gathered and got onto our plane at the proper time. But then something happened. It seemed that every time they tried to turn on the cabin lights, the engine shut down. Now, probably good that we discovered this while we were still on the ground. But they kept on doing. I could tell they really didn't know what was going on because they kept on. Okay, so they shut down all of the cabin lights and the air the air filtration circulating system on the plane and got the engine started, and then they turned on the cabin stuff and the engine shut down. And they did this for a little while. We're all sitting on the plane waiting to get into Chicago, and we haven't even left Edmonton yet because every time they turn on the cabin electronics, the engine shuts off. And it's hard to, take off without an engine. So this went on for a while, and, stewardess came out and told us that they were just having a bit of an electronics problem, but they were going to get it fixed. And, but the problem was, again, that we had a connecting flight. We had about an hour extra, but we had a connecting flight out of Chicago to go to Indianapolis. We finally got in the air. Okay, there is a happy ending to the story. We finally got into the air. Nobody left. Nobody, got so freaked out at the plane not being able to start that they decided they weren't going to go to Indianapolis anymore. They're going to, drive and be late. We all got on the plane. The plane left, and it landed in Indianapolis. But we were quite late for our connecting flight. We had about 10 minutes, if I remember correctly, before the plane took off. But Chicago's a huge airport. And we had to get from one gate on one side to another gate on another side of the airport. And we had about 10 minutes to do it. Now, luckily, our luggage was automatically being transferred, but we had to boot it with our carry-on to get to this gate where our connecting flight was leaving for Indianapolis. So we're hustling, the group of us, trying to get down. I was younger then, so I was able to, go faster than I can today. And we got down into this gate, and we get to this gate, and we are greeted with the news that our connecting flight had mechanical problems. And they had grounded the plane. The good news was there was another plane they were going to put us on to go from Indianapolis Chicago to Indianapolis, but it was at a different gate again. But the good news was we had an hour. So we had an hour to find this third gate and get to, board the plane that would take us to Indianapolis. So we started to move towards this gate. We were a little bit more relaxed since we had an hour. We were a little more relaxed as we went to find this other gate. And my full expectation was that the group from that other city was going to be already there, because we had a plane, electronic program or a problem, and then, whatever else. I thought they'll be there waiting for us, wondering where we are. So we went to this gate, and we get to this gate, and there is nobody that I know from the other group that is at the gate. And I'm going, are we in the right spot? They should be here by now. But there was nobody there. And then I turned around, and I saw a guy that I knew very well, who was flying out of that other place in southern Alberta. And he was running as hard as he could go, trying to get to the second gate that we had just come from. And so I ran over, and I kind of, Bob, stop! And he turns around and looks at me, and he stops, and he goes, the gate's over here. That plane had technical problems. We've got another plane, but we've got an hour yet. Don't give yourself a heart attack. Everything's fine. And he said, oh, okay. And then the rest of the Southern Alberta group was coming through. And so we just waved them all into the gate where we were going to be taking off. And an hour later, we took off from Chicago, and we got to Indianapolis and had a phenomenal week. Why that story came into my mind, I think, was just, it was just so providential. By the way, the plane from Southern Alberta had mechanical problems as well, which is why they were late. So both of the Alberta planes were struggling. The one Chicago plane was struggling, but everything actually worked out. In the end, we didn't miss any flights. Even if everything had gone on time, we wouldn't have been, if the Chicago flight had still been broken, we would have still had to catch the same plane that we caught. We were able to relax and get there, if not on time, at least kind of in God's time. Why I think that story came to mind was because I actually learned that somebody passed away this week. I actually learned a couple people passed away. One of the people that I know, and the other one I don't, and it's really the one that I don't that connects to this story. Her name was Diane Ball, and I don't know Diane at all. I'm not a friend of Diane in any way. I've never met her in real life, never shook hands. I know her by her work. And I didn't realize that she had passed away. She passed away in 2023. I'm not sure when in 2023 she passed away, but she would have been about 82 years old. So when I heard that Diane had passed away, I started thinking about, some of the things that I know about her. And one of them is a story that she told of going on holidays one year. And Diane says that, she had her family together. She has 3 or 4 kids, husband, probably like a 5th kid. And they were planning on going on holidays, but before they went on holidays, she had a speaking engagement. And so the idea was they were all packed for holidays. They're going to drive to the speaking engagement. She would speak, and then once she was done speaking, they would take off for their vacation. So on the day that they were to leave, the car is packed, everybody's ready to go, but Dad gets a message that there's an emergency where he works and they need him to come in. And so Dad says this won't take long, and he takes off, and he goes into work to take care of the emergency. And it takes him longer than he expects. probably not a story that none of us know. It's going to be a 15-minute job to fix it, and it turns into an hour. Well, he goes to work, and he's fixing this problem. By the time he gets home to pick up his family and start the vacation, the speaking engagement is an hour and a half drive away, but they have to be there in 45 minutes. And Diane's not impressed. Maybe women can probably understand that. She's not impressed. So she gets the kids in the car, she gets herself in the car and her husband in the driver's seat, and she's fuming. And so she decides the political thing to do, or the proper thing to do, the spiritual thing to do, is to just be quiet and fume in the passenger seat. So she grabs her notes on the speech that she's going to be giving in, well, it's supposed to be 45 minutes, but now it's going to be at least an hour and a half. And she starts going through her notes so that she's ready for whatever happens when they get to this conference. And so she sits there, husband's driving, she's sitting there, she's mad, and she's frustrated, and she wonders how they could have, how did this happen to us? And she goes over her notes. And as she's going over her notes, some phrases came to her that she started to put together in the passenger seat on her way to speak. And she starts to jot down these notes, these words that were coming to her. Little did she know that when she finally got to speak, these words were going to be very important in the speech that she was about to give. The words that she wrote down were this: in his time, he makes all things beautiful in his time. Lord, please show me every day, as you're teaching me your way, that you'll do just what you say in your time. In your time, you make all things beautiful in your time. Lord, my life to you I bring. May each song I have to sing be to you a lovely thing in your time. She said that the words and the tune came to her just while she was fuming in the passenger seat of the car, heading for this conference. That this really wasn't about her. This was about God. And whatever was going to happen wasn't going to happen in her time. She could be mad at her husband, but there was probably very little that he could have done to have changed any of this. But that even though she was late, even though she felt that that was a horrible thing to be, everything was going to be okay in his time. And I wonder sometimes about us. I was brought up by a grandfather. I was brought up by my parents, but I had two sets of grandparents who taught me a lot, and one of them was from my dad's dad. And you have to understand, my dad's dad was a very much on-time person. And one of the things that he placed in me is that you need to be on time. He went to a church in his last days that seemed to never be on time. And I can remember sitting down with him, and he'd be frustrated at the fact that the church started 20 minutes late. And he would look at me and he'd say, "Gary, People have covenanted to spend a specific amount of time with you. If you love them, you need to honor that time commitment. Don't start half an hour late. In fact, one time, Nelda and I went to his church. He was not there, and the pastor, of course, was not there. And so Nelda and I went to this church because they needed a guest speaker, and I became the guest speaker for the day. And so we showed up. The service started at 11 o'clock. We showed up, as is my custom because of my grandfather. If you're on time, you're late. Have you ever heard that? So we showed up at 10 o'clock. Service started at 11. And the church was locked, and there was nobody around. Around 10:30, somebody showed up. And so we went in and got ourselves situated. And the morning progressed. And about 5 to 11, the worship leader and the piano player had not yet shown up. And they happened to be married to each other, so they would probably show up together. You know how that is? And so it's 5 to 11. I've been ingrained into me that these people have covenanted to give you a specific amount of time. Therefore, you need to be on time. So I went over to Nelton and I said, well, the worship leader's got 5 minutes to get here, but if he doesn't, let's pick some hymns and we'll get the service going. He didn't show up. Nelda went and sat down at the piano. I went up on the pulpit, turned to hymn number 66, and let's sing. And we sang. About 20 after 11, the worship leader and piano player walked into the church, quite surprised that service was actually already going. But this is just something that God had drilled, or my grandfather had drilled into me, probably God too, that we should be an on-time people. There are going to be incidences. Plane engines are not going to start when the cabin lights are on. There's going to be things that are going to make us late once in a while, but it shouldn't be the normal. It should be the abnormal. Stuff happens. But in the absence of stuff, we, according to my grandfather, should be an on-time people. But there's no doubt in my trip from Edmonton to Indianapolis and in Diane's trip to this speaking match or speaking obligation that she had, this was about God's timing. Diane got to the conference. She was an hour late, but she wasn't the only one. There had been snags everywhere that day, and the conference didn't even start until an hour after Diane had gotten there. Everything was okay because it was in God's timing. And sometimes I think we just need to remember that yes, we can be on time, but there's also God's timing, and God's timing is perfect. He's an on-time God, never early, never late. We are studying from Isaiah. I just want to pick up today in Isaiah 46. Let me read. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. Listen to me, you descendants of Jacob, all of the remnant of the people of Israel, with whom I have upheld since your birth and have carried since you were born. Even in your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. And if you're trying to fill in the blanks, it's just bearing our burdens. I think I mentioned a couple, 3-4 months ago, that at the advice of somebody who actually attended here, I read American Gods by Neil Gaiman. American Gods is this fantasy novel that postulates that we walk among the gods. The various gods are all out there. And they gain strength, according to Neil, by the strength of worship that is given them by their followers. So a stronger God is worshipped more than a weaker God. And so the story itself concerns a man named Shadow who is in jail, and he gets released early because his wife has died in a car accident. And so he's due to be released in a few days, but because of the death, he is released early, and he starts to make his way home towards where he and his wife had lived. And on the way, he comes in contact with some of these gods that walk among us. The main one in the story is Mr. Wednesday, which is actually a reference to the Norse god Odin. And there are several others that Shadow meets as he travels with Mr. Wednesday and tries to get the things done that he feels that he is supposed to do. You can ask if he met Jesus in the book, and he does. Jesus is hanging on what Gaiman calls a world cross. He's not called Jesus, he's called the bearded man. And he is hanging on this cross, and he is upset in his conversations with Shadow because his people have misunderstood his teachings and have applied them everywhere. And because of that, they are being applied nowhere. And according to rumor, Neil actually sweated over this portion of his book because he kept on removing it, rewriting it, and replacing it. So this one caused him some real pain about what to say about Jesus. But I understand his comment. Sometimes that's the way we are. We apply to everything, and therefore we don't follow Jesus' teachings at all. So this is the story of American gods and Gaiman's idea of the gods. And I'm always amazed at people who take books like this and say, this is the way it really is. I have a friend who read American Gods, and he says, you know what? That's what I believe. I believe the gods are walking among us, and they're strong and they're weak. And I'm going, well, that's not what the Bible says. Well, the Bible talks about other gods. He goes, no. The Bible makes allowances for the beliefs of the people who are outside of this belief in Yahweh. But it never says that those gods are real. So you need to be careful. Isaiah seems to get personal in this section of Isaiah. And he starts to name names. And the first name is Bel. And that's probably a reference to a god named Bel Marduk. And he was the god of Babylon. So his shrine was in the city of Babylon. And he was the god of the capital city. And you would go there to worship Bel Marduk. And Bel Marduk was worshipped with this phrase: he is the son of the gods. Radiant is he. So Isaiah says, I want you to understand that Bel is being worshipped. Bel Marduk is being worshipped. Isaiah probably didn't know this, but one of the last kings of the Babylonian Empire was a man named Belshazzar, which means Bel Marduk, protect the king. So Isaiah is saying, listen, I want you to understand that Bel is being worshipped. And then he also goes on and he says that Nebo, probably more properly Nabu, is also being worshipped. Bel and Nebo. And Nebo is the son of Marduk. And he resides in Borsippa, the sister city of Babylon. So you've got these two gods living in these two closely associated cities. One is Bel Marduk, the other is Nabu. and they are worshipped in their cities. But then something happens. Because Nabu is the son of Bel-Marduk, the people of Borsippa, every New Year's, would go to the temple and take down the huge stone statue of Nabu. And they would take it down and they would march it outside of the temple and actually march it on their shoulders all the way from Borsippa to Babylon, where they would place Nabu beside his father Bel-Marduk so that the two can have a bit of a visit. So every year, Marduk and Nabu get to see each other New Year's, and they visit with each other before the people take Nabu back to Borsippa. And I can just imagine Isaiah watching this, watching the people with this heavy, stone god on their shoulders, carrying him from Borsippa to Babylon to visit with his father, and then back from Babylon to Borsippa, where he can be in his own temple one more time. And you can almost hear it in his words as he watches the burden being carried by the people. Listen to what he says in the very first verse. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome. A burden for the weary. And then he says, listen, Israel, that's not your God. Your God does not want to weigh you down with burdens. He's the God who wants to lift you up, to carry you. He is the one who will bear your burdens if you will let him. They're gods, you have to carry them. But Yahweh, he carries you. And he always has. Let's skip over to verse 8. Isaiah writes this, remember this, keep it in mind, take it to heart, you rebels. Remember the former things, those of long ago. I am God, and there is no other. Did you hear that? There aren't a bunch of gods walking around out there. I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I summon a bird of prey. From a far-off land, a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said that I will bring about, what I have planned, that I will do. Listen to me, you stubborn-hearted, you who are now far from my righteousness. I am bringing my righteousness near. It is not far away, and my salvation will not be delayed. I grant salvation to Zion, my splendor to Israel. Again, that next blank is God of the story. I know we kind of, in various ways, keep on returning to this idea that God is the God of our stories. He's not just the God of the biblical story, although he is, but more than that, he is the God of our stories. He's the God that leads us, is part of what we do, part of what Israel did, part of what those who have lived in between us have done. He is the God of the story. He understands the story. Even sometimes when we struggle to understand what the story is. When I was a small, and I've mentioned, some of you have heard this from me. I had a struggle with Matthew 1 to be precise. The genealogy, to even be more precise, in Matthew 1. And part of my problem with the genealogy was that as a kid, I was bored one day, and so I sat down with the Bible. I thought that would be a good thing to do. And I started to count the generations listed in the Bible, especially the kings. And I noticed that there were generations missing in Matthew's rendition of this genealogy of Jesus. There were generations that were missing. And not only were there generations missing, but one, at the end of the kings, before we go into the exile part, there's one king that's used twice. So some are missing and one king's used twice. And none of this would matter. I mean, it's quite normal from what I understand, especially in that day, to miss generations, to just hit the high points. But what bugged me was what it says in Matthew 1. It says this, verse 17, thus there were 14 generations, all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. And as a kid, I'm going, but that's not true. That's manufactured. There aren't 14. There's more than 14 from David to the exile. So Matthew, what are you doing here? And it took me a long time to finally figure out what Matthew was trying to tell me. And basically, the message that he's trying to give us is not about factual generations, but in using this literary device, he's saying you have to understand that when the time was right, in his time, God sent Abraham. When the time was right, according to God's timing, he was the one who sent David. When the time was right, when God saw that the time was right, he sent Babylon into exile. And when the time was right, according to God's timing, he brought and gave to Israel their Messiah. But none of this was outside of God's timing. When the time was right, he would bring things about. And then he says, you know what? Let me be God of all the in-between times as well. Yes, you are to live in my timing and God's timing, but I am also the God of normal time as well, of everything else. Listen to what he says here. Remember this and keep it in mind. Take it to heart, you rebels. Remember the former things, those long ago. I am God, there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning. From ancient times, what is still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. So God meets us in the garden. He's there and he walks with Adam and Eve in the cool of the day until the serpent comes and tempts them and gets them to do what is wrong. And then they hide from God because they know that they are naked. They know that they have broken covenant with God. And God comes to them, and he comes to the serpent, and this is in the very beginning. Because in Isaiah, he says, I will make known the end from the beginning. So from the very beginning, he says this, so the Lord said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly. You will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between her offspring and between your offspring and hers. And he will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. From the very beginning, God had in plan that a day would come when the Son of Man would crush the head of the serpent, Satan. And he came in Jesus Christ. I will speak of the end, and I will speak of the end in the beginning. I will be there in the beginning. I will be there when you are crying out to me from Egypt because you were being mistreated. I will send Moses. I will send him to come and be with you. I will send the kings. I will send the prophets and the priests. I will be there all the way through your journey until the day comes when all of this will end. I love this verse just because it explains so much. It's from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. 8, thank you. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise, as some have understood slowness. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. God's not slow. He's watching our stories. And he says, you know what, there's still some people that I think should be in the kingdom. And I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to wait until we can get as many people as we can into this journey. I'm willing to wait. My timing will wait until everything is right. Just think of that. You are important enough that God is willing to wait for you. I'm important enough that God is willing to wait for me. He wants to be part of my story that badly that he will wait. Picking up Isaiah 47, go down, sit in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, queen city of the Babylonians. No more will you be called tender or delicate. Take millstones and grind flour. Take off your veil, lift up your skirts, bare your legs, and wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be exposed, and your shame uncovered. I will take vengeance. I will spare no one. Our Redeemer, the Lord Almighty, is his name, is the Holy One of Israel. That last blank is God's final word. It's a phenomenon that I run into every once in a while when I'm talking with people, and they'll say, they'll make some statement, I could never believe in a God who, fill in the blank. And my reaction, I don't usually say this out loud unless I have a really good relationship with whoever's I'm talking to. But my reaction is, hey, he's God. Whether you agree with him or not really doesn't have a whole lot to do with this. He's God. He will have the final say. I love the story of God coming to Moses and saying, you know what, I have seen and I have heard the pain of the people in Egypt. And so I have come and I am sending you. And Moses reacts, God, I've already tried this and it didn't work. I tried this 40 years ago. It didn't work. I'm quite happy where I'm at. I don't need to go. And God says, no, I am sending you. I have seen, I have heard. That phrase alone is enough for several sermons. I have seen and I have heard. I have seen you. I am listening. I know what's going on. And I am sending you to fix this problem. Moses, I'm sending you to Egypt. And Moses' reaction is, well, I can't speak very well. He says, okay, I'll get your brother Aaron to come and he can speak for you. I'm old. I'm 80 years old. God, you don't expect me to do this when I'm 80 years old, do you? Yeah, I do. You can do it. There's no retirement age in my kingdom. As long as you're breathing, I've got a plan and a job for you. So finally, Moses says, well, who are you? Who should I say that is sending me? And God replies with this phrase, Hayah, Hayah. And we have interpreted that to be, I am who I am. Just think about that. I am who I am. I will be who I will be. This is who I am. This is who is sending you. The I am. And all of this is, Moses, I'm the God who exists. Tell them that the God who exists has sent you. I am who I am. You don't get to choose my characteristics. I will reveal them to you. But I am the God who is sitting on the throne. I am the God who created you. I am the God who guides you. I am the God who will gather you to your ancestors and bring you home. I am that God. I am that I am. Moses, this is my final word. Tell them that I am sent you. And Moses goes and he tells them that I am sent him, and the people leave. And basically, Isaiah picks up with that idea where he says, our Redeemer, the Lord Almighty is his name. He is the Holy One of Israel. Nothing has happened that he doesn't know about. Nothing has happened that he is not interested in. He has seen our successes and he has seen our failures. He has forgiven us. He is a God of goodness and of mercy. And we have experienced that goodness and mercy. He is the God who reaches down from heaven and lifts us up. And in the end, yes, there will be a time when there will be a judgment. And God will be the judge, and he will be the one who will separate us, separate the sheep from the goats. But those of us who have claimed the blood of Jesus over our lives will be brought home to him. And we can trust I am, because we know in our own lives that he is a good God. That his goodness is all around us. His goodness is in our past. The way he has led us yesterday, from the very beginning. We can trust him with what will happen in our tomorrows. Jen Johnson is a worship leader. And her and her husband have 3 children. If you've had children, 3 is a nice number. Neld and I weren't good enough. We only had 2. But Jen and her husband have 3 children. And their hands are full. As I can imagine with most parents with 3 children. Their hands were full taking care of this family of 3. And then Jen started to pray, and there was a chance that opened up for her to adopt another child. The child's name was Ryder. And her prayers were, God, yeah, I get it. Ryder needs parents, but I've got my hands full. I've got 3 children. You've already given us 3. Is there a reason why I should go for 4? But she couldn't get this thought out of her head, and her husband talked about it. And finally, they made the decision that if God wanted them to have a fourth child, they would have a fourth child. And they adopted Ryder and brought him into their family. And she could not believe the joy that Ryder brought, not just to her and her husband, but to the kids as well. And she can't imagine what life would have been like without Ryder in their midst. And Jen says that one day she was out on a drive in the country. And she was just thinking about what God had done in her life. What God had done in bringing Ryder into her life. Her children, her husband. And she said, I was just so filled with just joy. And she said, the words started to just bubble out of me. And here's what they were. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. I don't know where you are this morning. I get that. I know where some of you are. Some of you have had a horrible week. And it has been tough just to get up in the morning. And you wonder, God, do you see me? That's kind of where Nelda and I have been too. And it's like, Father, I know you're there. And I know that everything will be made right in your timing, but this has been hard. Hearts are broken. I'm tired. God, what is it that you're asking of me? And if that's where you're at today, we're going to sing Jen Johnson's song. And I'd like you to sing that as a prayer for you. I love you, Lord. I love you. I understand your goodness, but right now, where I'm at, I need something. God, come. Bring your counselor, your comforter. Help us through what is there. Some of you are probably where Jen was when she wrote the song. It's been a good week. Things have been going fairly well. And you just want to thank God that He is a good God. Sing the song as your prayer, expressing your goodness or your belief in His goodness and your thankfulness for what He's done in your life. Maybe most of you are somewhere in between there. And for you, I'd like you to sing that song as your prayer as well. God, I don't know. In your timing, I'm not sure what's coming next, but God, I want to stay close to you. I know that whatever is coming from a God who loves me and who is good. And I believe in that goodness. So come. Whatever it is, Lord, I'm ready. Give me the strength to go through whatever is on the horizon. Let me express my love for you in good and in bad. For your goodness and your love.
All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so